Good evening. Welcome to our Level 4 Professional Synoptic Revision session. My name is Catherine. I'm one of the tutors here at First Intuition, and we're going to have a look tonight mainly at Task 3. But I'm also going to run through, as it's the first revision session, I'm going to run through a bit of an overview of the task in the exam in general, but not in loads of detail for each one. This session is being recorded, and the recording should be sent to you tomorrow morning. So if you can't attend it all tonight, then please feel free to watch it at your leisure after the recording has come out tomorrow. Okay, so the synoptic, the dreaded synoptic exam that everybody seems to hate. People want to do everything they can to avoid doing it, but inevitably some people still have to sit this exam. However, what I would say is I don't think it's as bad as a lot of people think it is, because you can very much, play the game, jump through the hoops, make sure that you are doing as the question's asking you to do, and that will stand you in really, really good stead for getting through this exam. So if we have a quick look then, what I've done is start us off with is a bit of an overview of the exam as a whole. Okay, so we've got, has it changed much for the new pre-release? In terms of what each task covers, it's still very, very similar. The only thing that has changed is the company that is being used on the assessment. So it will be a new pre-release, and you need to be familiar with that pre-release material before you go into the exam. I wouldn't spend tons of time on the pre-release. I would just give it maybe a couple of reads through. You can find it on your AAT, your My AAT learning portal under the synoptic course. But if you are an FI student, then it should be on your MyFI account as well. When looking at the pre-release, I would say you want to be making sure that you're familiar with the members of the staff that are mentioned, because that's quite useful, particularly for that. Also, you probably will get some financial data in there as well. And I would recommend maybe having a go with practicing your performance indicators and ratios on those, because that could come in very much useful. So tonight we're going to have a look at task 3 from one of our mocks. If you are a First Intuition student, it is mock 1. If you're not a First Intuition student and you want our mocks, you can purchase a mock bank from our website, and that will give you access to 2 mock assessments, which you can have a go at. So that's quite well, I'd say it's worth doing. But yeah, we're going to have a look at task 3. Before that, we'll have just a bit of a general chat about kind of what the exam entails, given that this is the first revision session. So what everyone hates about the synoptic is the fact we've got a lot of writing to do. Yeah, so you've got, out of these 6 tasks that are given to you, 4 of them have written things in them. So you can see what I've got on here. You've got 2 20-mark tasks, task 1 and 5. They are your computer mark ones. So they're the kind of the easier wins, shall we say. And I'll talk a bit about what's in each of those in a minute. But then you've got these 4 tasks that are 15 marks each, where you are going to be doing quite a bit of writing, and that's what students hate. Because we've only got 4 revision sessions, I don't see that we're going to be looking at task 1 and task 5, because to be honest, students don't tend to struggle with them. They tend to be quite happy with them. You'll see that in a minute when we have a look at some of the kind of exam performance. But yeah, so we'll probably be looking at each one of those 4 written ones within the next 4 sessions. There is also a bit of a kind of game that you can play in terms of getting efficient completion out of this exam. I wouldn't recommend, oh yeah, sorry, I've just noticed that Anne's popped the link to the questions in the chat. So if you haven't got them, you can find them in the chat box. In terms of completing the exam, as I say, I wouldn't go through and do task 1, task 2, task 3, task 4, task 5 and task 6. I would play a bit of a game with it, because you can be very efficient with your time if you do as I'm recommending here. I would always say do those computer mark questions first. You know, task 1 is very much true, false, filling in the blanks, that sort of thing, from a very wide breadth of knowledge. You know, it can be anything really. You know, students have come from and say, what's a bank? You know, what's a bank reconciliation? I did that in level 2. It can be like that. Yeah. So you've got to make sure you've got a good, solid knowledge of your kind of topics from further down the line. But students do not seem to have problems with task 1, so I wouldn't worry too much. You think, oh gosh, I've got to know everything. Task 5, I think again is probably the easiest task on this, because it's about ratios. Yeah. So when I said about using the pre-release material and having a go at practicing those performance indicators, that might be why I said that, because you'll probably be asked to do that in the exam itself. Yeah. And if you can get all those ratios correct, there's 20 marks straight away without you having really to do any, well, you haven't got to do any writing at all, which is great. So yeah, if you get that task 1 and task 5 done, there's 40 marks available there out of 100 marks. So you know, get nearly full marks on that, get full marks on that. You're 35 to 40% of the way. You're over halfway to getting into a pass, which is what we need. We need 70%, let's face it. What I would then do is go on to the written tasks. But again, I wouldn't necessarily go to 3, 4 and 6. I would start with task 3, which is our weaknesses task, which we'll have a look at in depth tonight. Then you've got task 6, which is your kind of SWOT analysis, cost benefit analysis, that sort of thing. And then you can either do task 2, then task 4, or task 4, then task 2, whatever you prefer. The reason I say this is because task 2 and 4, they can be a bit of a time hole, in that you can sit and, you know, happily spend 45 minutes on them, and that's not really an efficient use of your time. If you leave them to the end, you're a bit more kind of focused on how much time you've got left, and it means that you won't waste time and kind of leave yourself short at the end. So that's what I would do. It's your exam, you can do what you choose, but that's how I would approach it. And I think, as I say, this exam is one of those ones where you are ended up kind of playing a bit of a game and jumping through the hoops that AAT needs you to jump through to get a pass. So the other thing that's quite useful to have a look at is the examiner's report. I've included a little bit from the examiner's report on here. I'm just going to make it a little bit bigger if it will let me, so we can see. If you haven't looked at an examiner's report for your other units, I would highly recommend that you find it on the, again, it's on the AAT's learning portal on your AAT login. You'll find it under the unit, under the synoptic unit. It will give you some big clues as to what is being assessed in each task. It will talk about the strengths and weaknesses of students who have completed the exam, and the 2022 one is out, so that's the most up-to-date one from last year. What it also does, as we've got in here, is a bit of a graph about performance on each task. And green is good, red and light red is less good. Yeah, so we're looking, you know, if we look at task 1 and task 5, our computer marked tasks, students do quite well on those. You know, we're getting over, you know, over 80, probably about 85% of students are meeting the pass mark on task 1. That's really, really good. And just over 70% on task 5, you know, students are passing. So again, that should give you a bit of confidence with those. However, as is probably expected, the weaknesses are very much with these written tasks. And I think this is quite surprising that task 3 is actually the weakest one, because I don't think it's the most difficult thing to do. It's very, very set what you'll be asked to do on that task. It's, again, just jumping through those hoops and doing exactly as they are asking. So I'm hoping that what we have a look at tonight will help to give you some hints and tips about progressing through a task. So we're going to have a look at some tips, general tips now, and then we'll go through a question, and that will give you a chance to see what's going on. Okay, so task 3, let me just make that a little bit smaller so we can get it all on one thing. So the main thing that task 3 looks at is that you need to be able to identify weaknesses within processes within the scenario company, and also understand the impact that that weakness has on the organisation. Okay, you may also be asked to make recommendations to improve the process. So 2 to 3 different things to be looking at. But again, I think it's very set what they will ask you to do. The goal with this is to have your sort of detective hat on and be able to spot those weaknesses. But I've got some ideas of how you can spot those, make it a bit easier for you. This is one of the 15 mark tasks, as all the written ones are. We recommend probably about 27 minutes, that's very specific, but about, you're looking at around between 25 and 30 minutes to complete this task. Okay. The first thing I would say when you get to task 3 is that you'll be given a huge amount of information to read through before you even get to those question points. It's so tempting to get that screen up and go, right, I'm going to read all this information. And then you're thinking, oh gosh, that's a lot. And then you get to the questions and it says, identify weaknesses and do this, that and the other. And you think, right, okay, I'll go back and read it again. So you end up reading the information twice. What I would do, I'd scroll all the way past that information on the question, and I'd get to the point where it says what it wants you to do. You know, identify the weaknesses, you know, explain what the impact is on the organisation, make a recommendation, whatever it asks you to do. Because then you can read all that task information with a much more structured focus. You can go, right, I'm looking for weaknesses, I'm looking for what the impact is on the organisation. And then you're not having to kind of go through it more than once. You'll probably find that you do end up reading this more than once as you go through, because if you've got 5 weaknesses to spot, they may not jump out at you straight away on a first read through. So what I would probably end up doing is, say you found 3 weaknesses, get them jotted down, explain those points, and then go back and look for your other 2. Yeah. But it just will save you, even save you a couple of minutes. It's really, really important on this exam. You've got a lot to do in the time. So yeah, definitely read the question first and then look at the information. This is another really, really important one. In the information, look for words like should. I don't know, John should check the master file or something like that. Or, the process is that the sales commissions get approved by a manager. However, sometimes when they are on holiday, this does not happen, or sometimes they forget to do this. Straight away, words like that will show you a weakness, and you'll see that in the question that we're going to look at. Those are your kind of key in the lock words, going, here's a weakness, here's a weakness. They're not this is a process that is sometimes not happening, and that's a clear internal controls problem. The next 2 points that I'm going to make are more about presentation of your answer. Sometimes with task 3, you'll be given a box with maybe 4 or 5 lines in, depending on how many weaknesses they want you to spot. Or sometimes you might just get a great big box and you've got to fill it all in. If you are unlucky and you get that great big box, split your answers out. Take weakness 1 and use headings. You put weakness 1 is this. What's the impact on the organisation? What's your recommendation? Split them out into paragraphs. Your marker will love you if you do that, and they'll find it much easier to look for what they need to find in order to give you those marks. Yeah. So again, it's playing the game. Make sure that you are showing them really clearly, what amazing work you've done, and you've found 5 weaknesses, and here they are in 5 separate paragraphs, and all beautiful. Make it easy for them. And similarly, if you are asked to make recommendations, which isn't a given, you may be, you may not be really clear how this will resolve the issue. You know, if you're saying, you know, I want to, you know, maybe put a segregation of duties in place that means that one person will put the payment on the system and another person will authorise it. Say why that will stop fraud and errors from happening, because then that gives you that extra impetus to get that mark. If when you're putting a recommendation on and you want a specific person to do it, also make sure you name that person, because it shows that you have used that pre-release material to be able to identify who these people are and who the people that are relevant to be involved in that recommendation. Yeah, so again, it's a lot of this is jumping through those hoops that we need to. So with that in mind, we'll have a look at an example task 3. So here we go. So it says you have been asked to review the adequacy of controls in the AEM payroll procedures. Right, so we're looking at payroll. Yeah, so paying people, money going out the door. This is really a lot of fraud and errors that could happen that would cost the company money. And your review has established the following. Right, ignore that for now. Let's get down to what we're being asked to do. We've got a lot of information there, which we will go through. But what we're being asked to do, let's go on to the next page, if it'll let me. Okay, so it says, complete your review as follows. Identify 5 weaknesses in the payroll system. It's another thing to make sure you're doing. Make sure it's related to payroll. Don't relate it to something else. It has to be about payroll and not anything other systems that might be mentioned. For each one, we need to explain the problem this might cause for the company. So we're looking at possibilities for fraud to happen, for errors to occur, you know, for us not paying the right people the right money, basically. And then we need to make a recommendation of an improvement to the process. So then we know what we need to do now. We're looking for 5 weaknesses, what the impact is on the company, and then a possible recommendation to improve it. So we can go back to our information now and we'll read it with a more critical eye. And what I'm going to do is, as we go through, if you see anything that you think, that's a red flag, pop it in the chat box, and then we can have a look when we come back together after we've reviewed the data and see what we've got as possible weaknesses. Where's the info for this question? It should be, if you're an FI student, it's mock 1, and if not, you've got the download. Which page? 276 is the page on the mocks. I think Anne's still here, so she might be able to confirm if it's a different page on what she's got. Thanks, Anne. Yeah, I think we're on the same point. We all good? Can I crack on? Okay, so as we go through, we'll have a look and see what we've got in terms of anything that you're thinking, that seems a little bit strange, and then we can at least come back together, and I'm sure we'll get 5 weaknesses between us. Thank you. So I've seen someone says it's page 26 as well, so if you've got a downloaded file, it's on there. Okay, so we've got a few sections. The first one is about payroll and staff payments. We've got sales staff and then other staff, and all sorts of stuff. So let's get cracking. So it says that Alison Clockwell, who is the finance director, has overall responsibility for authorising the payroll, and she's supported by John Morris, the payroll clerk. Yeah, this is in the mock. This is in the mock bank. If you've got the FI file, this is for the AEM limited scenario, just in case you've got a book that's older. Right. Okay. So it says about different staff. So sales staff are paid a basic salary of £2,000 per month. If they sell between 0 and 9 cars in the month, they will just get their basic salary. Once they sell 10 cars, then they start receiving a commission of £100 per car. They also earn £30 commission for each add-on sold. These could be warranties or insurance products. When a salesperson records a sale on the system, their username registers who made the sale. I'm just going to pull this up on my other screen, so I've got a bit of an idea. There we go. That's a bit easier for me to see. The sales manager then will run a report each month to show how many cars and add-ons have been sold by each salesperson. The sales manager then emails the figures to John Morris, the payroll clerk, who inputs them into the payroll system. Right, what can we see on here? Oh, that's a good one. Yeah, so possibly an issue with the fact that there's kind of an extra stage in the process, isn't there? We've got this email that's going on that the sales manager has to put together. So it could be, like it's been said, those figures could be falsified, or it could be that he's entered them incorrectly. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's good. Oh wow, we're getting some really good answers coming through here. But yeah, that's the one thing in that section that really jumped out at me. Yeah, could be. Yeah, absolutely. There's so many possible issues here. But I think yeah, there's an extra stage in that manual process that we probably could improve on. Now that's for the sales staff. We've then got quite a bit about other staff, so we're going to go through this maybe a chunk at a time. So permanent other staff, not sales staff, work a standard number of hours per week as specified in their employment contract. However, at busy times, staff can be requested by management to work additional shifts as overtime. This can either be paid on a monthly basis or taken as extra days off. So the employees record any overtime worked and days taken off on weekly overtime sheets, which are then sent to John Morris. Now remember, John is our payroll clerk. The standard hours per employee are automatically set up in the payroll system, and the overtime sheets are entered by John into the payroll system, which automatically calculates the gross and net pay along with relevant deductions. These calculations are not checked at all, as the computer system has cost a significant amount and so is expected to be reliable. That rings alarm bells in my head. Yeah, and the fact that John's not, these aren't being checked potentially. John's doing all the process. There's not enough segregation of duties. So you can see there's quite a lot of stuff here that could potentially be an issue. We'll keep going. Wages are increased by the rate of inflation each year, and John is responsible for updating the standing data in the payroll system. Employees are paid on a monthly basis by bank transfer for their contracted weekly hours and for any overtime worked in the previous months. If employees choose to be paid for overtime, authorization is required by the relevant manager of any overtime in excess of 30% of their contracted hours. Yeah, I would just say people have picked already. So what's the issue with that? Yeah, brilliant. If there's anything up to 30% of their standard contracted hours that they've put down their sheet as overtime, nobody's checking it. Bit of a red flag? Exactly. Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, we're getting some really good answers here, which is really encouraging for going about in this exam. So yeah, not enough authorization potentially. However, things kind of get a little bit more murky as well. It says, because obviously the employees have got that option. They can either have overtime pay or they can take the time back kind of as time off in lieu, as it were. If they choose to take days off instead of having the pay, then John should check back to the overtime worked report. Yeah, there's that word again, that should. However, and here we go, we've got another word. However, this report is not always checked, as he is often very busy around month end. Yeah, so that first sentence on that paragraph is just the biggest like alarm bells. Woo, woo, woo. He should be checking it, but he is not always doing it because he's busy at month end. Complete red flag. So this overtime worked report, which details any overtime recorded by employees, is run weekly and emailed to the relevant managers for authorization. John asks the managers to report if there are any errors recorded. What do we think about that last bit? We said the first part of the paragraph is a load of red flags. Yeah, well done. The fact that he's only asking to report if there are errors, that again makes me think, what if they forget? Managers are required to arrange for overtime sheets to be authorised by an alternative responsible manager when they are on annual leave. However, there are instances where this arrangement has not occurred. So there we go. So that's just probably adding to what we've got in the previous one. Yeah, exactly. You're throwing loads of really good stuff in the chat here as to reasons why something might not have happened. Flip that around in a minute and think about what the problem is for this not happening. Right, last little bit. The payroll package produces a list of payments per employee. This links into the bank system to produce a list of automatic payments. Sounds good. Alison Clockwell, the finance director, reviews the total amount of all bank transfers and compares this to the total monthly net pay per the payroll records. If any issues arise, then the automatic bank transfer can be manually changed by the finance director. Yeah, well done. Someone's put it in the chat straight away. A lot of that seems quite good to me. Like, oh, that's done automatically, and there's no potential for human error. However, the fact that she reviews the total, I think, presents a problem. Okay, so we've got quite a lot of highlighting there, and it can be difficult to think, well, can I get 5 weaknesses out there? I've probably got more than 5 weaknesses. There might be ones that jump out and ones that don't jump out. What I would say is I would go for the ones that are quite obvious. You don't get any extra marks or credit for going for obscure weaknesses. Just go for the ones that jump out at you, particularly, if you're able to then pull it through. Okay, so I'm going to apologise now because the next bit I'm going to do on a Word document because my writing is unbelievably atrocious on a stylus. It's left-handed problems. So if you've got the this in front of you, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up, rather than writing it on the next page, I've got a blank Word document which we'll have a look at. Okay, and I'm going to copy it in. So we've got 5 to fill in. So let's first of all think back. What have we got as weaknesses? What did we pick? I know we've got all sorts. But the first one that we picked was, I'm just going back up to see, that the overtime wasn't always authorised, didn't we? We had that one. So let's copy that in. There are we. There we go. Pop that in there, and then we can. So we've identified a weakness there. The overtime wasn't always authorised, only if it was above 30% of the standard hours. What is the problem for AEM Limited if all the overtime isn't authorised? What might happen? I know people did pick this up, but let me just go around, go back down again. Yeah, possible payroll fraud. Yeah, they can't budget for it. That's a really good one. But the main issue is that they could be paying for hours that have not been worked. Employees could be claiming for, spurious overtime in kind of small amounts. They maybe put, a couple of extra hours of overtime on the sheet and no one's going to check. They're getting paid for hours that they haven't worked. So yeah, there is a massive fraud issue there. That employees could be being paid for overtime that they haven't actually worked. Yeah. So, you've done really well on that, but you can see how you've got to look at what the impact is financially for them. Yeah, and you're always looking at is this going to mean fraud in some way or another? Okay. So. Yeah, exactly. They could go right up to the limit and claim 29% of the working hours, and no one's checking it. So, what would our recommendation be? What could we do to solve this? Yeah, spot on. People are picking up this one really, really nicely. Straight away, all overtime needs to be approved by the relevant manager, regardless of whether it's an extra hour or an extra lots and lots of hours. We're just going to have to approve everything. Well done. So yeah, what I would say on this is you've got 15 marks and you've got 15 different boxes to fill in, 5 weaknesses, 5 problems, 5 recommendations. So you don't have to write an essay for each little bit. As long as you are showing what the impact is, what the weakness is, what the impact is, and a recommendation, you should get a mark for each of these. You weren't asked to make an addition. How would you earn the 15 marks? It might be that they ask you for a bit more detail on a potential problem. So if you don't get a recommendation, it might be 1 mark for a weakness and then 2 marks for potential problems or something like that. I wouldn't use bullet points. AAT are looking for you to write in proper prose. Obviously, if you are strapped for time and it's a case of using bullet points or writing nothing at all, then bullet points is better than nothing, but they want to see you writing in full, explaining things properly. We're level 4 students. We want to see all that sort of thing. Right, what other weaknesses did we pick up? Let's just go back to our list. What have we got? So we've done about the excess of 30%. What else did we have? Yeah, we've got anything else in a similar vein? What about the overtime report? What did we say about that? Yeah. We said, didn't we, that the overtime report is sent to managers, but they only have to check it and go back to it if there are errors. Yeah, we talked about that. A lot of people jumped on that. So we'll look at that one next. So if the overtime report, basically, the managers only have to go back to John, the payroll clerk, to say if there are errors, what's the impact on the company? Yeah, well done. Yeah, silence does not necessarily mean approval in this case. Yeah, so the managers may not have, they may have missed the email. They may have, not checked it properly. Just because they are not responding doesn't mean that they've looked at it and they're happy with it. Yeah, so they only have to say if the report is wrong, and it could be, and as people said, it might be that therefore we're overpaying for overtime, because again, the employees could be claiming falsely. It could be that they're being yes, that's a really, really good point. They could be being overpaid, underpaid, or not paid at all. They could be missing off the report when they've legitimately done lots of overtime. And that has a staff morale issue, doesn't it? Not only a potential fraud and money in and out issue, but also staff morale, which is important too. So how do we solve this weakness? What can we recommend to AEM to do for solving this problem? It's probably a bit similar to what we had on the previous one. Yeah, that's a good, get managers to cross-reference it. You can give a similar recommendation. I think with this one, obviously, we're going to say we want the overtime to be confirmed by the managers. I mean, it might be that you need to say you need to reply by return to confirm that this is correct or not. I would also say that in this recommendation, make it timely. I wouldn't necessarily say that having a read receipt on the email would necessarily work as a fail-safe recommendation. That would tell you that the manager has read the email, but it doesn't tell you they've had a chance to review it, check it, and say yes, that's fine. We really, really want them to be saying that yes, I've looked at all of this, I'm happy, or I've looked at it, I'm not happy for this reason. Yeah. So I think they need to be confirming one way or the other, and John should not be, running that payroll until he's had confirmation from everyone. And also there's a timing issue there as well. That's a bit more detail than we need. So we've got 2 out of our 5. We'll go back to our data. What else have we got? What else did we see? What have we highlighted? We talked about John doing the process with doing this email, didn't we? So we've got a system where everybody is, the salespeople are putting their own things on, which is a bit, but then if they're recording a sale, then there should be other checks in that. And we're not looking at the sales process, we're looking at payroll, so we keep on that. A report is then generated, but John is then putting those figures into an email, and sorry, the sales manager's putting them in the email to John, apologies, and then John is putting them into the payroll system. that's very manual. Yeah, the sales manager is taking the commission's report and physically writing it out into an email. Yeah, lots of room for error, massive, you know, risk of human error. Wrong staff are being paid the wrong commissions. Yeah, I like that as well. Compromise of data is it's not an integrated system. Yeah, really, that's really good. I like that. I haven't put that in mind, but I think that's a really, really relevant point. You know, you've got risk of human error, and there's also a financial impact, isn't there? You know, we think about, again, people being paid too much or too little. Yeah, it's time consuming as well. I think for these potential problems, the first thing that I would look at is what's the potential issue with you know, cash flow, profit, the money. We're accountants, aren't we? We worry about the money. So I would look at that first, but there will be other non-financial impacts and problems for the company, but I'd always look for the ones where there's a financial impact first of all, because they're the glaring ones. So how do we solve this problem? How do we get over this sort of commissions process? Can we, you know, what can we do? I've got a couple here on my list, but I'll be interested to see what you say. Yeah, well done. Yeah, definitely have some integration into the payroll system, automate it. The other thing that they could do is potentially, rather than the sales manager sort of physically entering data into an email, just be able to maybe, I don't know, pull that report off into an Excel spreadsheet and then email that Excel spreadsheet over. It allows you to, you know, takes that stage out of human error, doesn't it? In that they're manually putting it in. So yeah, that was that one. Right, 2 more to go then. Let's see what else we've got. What else have we got? So we've got that one about the payroll system. We've got the what else have we got? Let's see. Yeah, that's fair enough. Yeah, I would say I would always look for the ones that are financial first, but you may not necessarily have 5 that are financial. So yeah. If potential problems of a couple of the weaknesses are the same, would you lose possible market with the same problem, i.e. employees overclaim being potential problem for 2 separate weaknesses? I think it would depend, Becky, on that one. It might be that you'd have to potentially look at probably 2 separate problems. If it caused different problems for the company, then you could potentially say that's a problem. Right. What else have we got? What else have we got? No segregation of duties for John. Yeah, very good. Yes. We've got this one. I've just seen it. So do you remember when we said about the timesheets should be checked? You should check the overtime work report, but it's not done because he's always quite busy. Yeah, so we could say that is definitely a weakness. John's too busy to check the overtime report for whether people are being paid or whether they're taking the time off. Yeah, that was great. So if the overtime pay list is not checked against the overtime report to see who's taken time off, then what's the issue? They could take both. Yeah, well done. So if they're maybe taking you know, being paid for the overtime but also then taking the time off, they're getting a double benefit, which they shouldn't be having. So, and if the report isn't checked, you know, we could have months go by where that's not being detected. So, you know, I know it says that John does not have the time, but what can the recommendation be to make this strong? Because at the moment there's not really a process in place for kind of what happens. So what do we need to be saying needs to happen to ensure this doesn't happen? You could potentially argue segregation of duties, but it's more about time. Yeah, this is good. Yeah, got some ones coming through now. We need to have a process, don't we? You know, at the moment it's just up to John. But there needs, he must be agreeing it. But at the moment there's no way of checking whether he has done it or not. Yeah, so we could put a process in place maybe where he has to sign it off to show it's been done each month. Yeah, or mark it as paid. Yeah, absolutely. So we're looking at, you know, to show, so that then if Alison, his manager, wants to come along and go, oh, has the overtime pay and the overtime report been checked? You know, John can go, yeah, I've done it and I've signed it off. If he hasn't done it, it will then flag up and he can say, no, I've just not had any time. And then we can look at moving that work to somebody else if that's available within the team, or Alison might be able to take it on herself potentially as the director. That's maybe higher level than lower level than she would do. But if we're desperate, we may need it. Right, let's keep going. We've got one more weakness to find. Now, there was one in this bottom section that I think everybody jumped on. What do we think? Yeah, well done. Yes. So this is a glaring one, this last paragraph. The bank transfer that Alison's checking, she's only checking the total and comparing it to the monthly net per the payroll records, which maybe isn't in-depth enough. You know, I'd say that we need to be doing a bit more than that. Yeah, she's not checking individual records. She's not doing anything like that. What is the potential problem for the company regarding this weakness in the process? What could happen? So you've always got to ask yourself, what could go wrong? What could happen? Yeah, errors could be missed. We could be paying people who've left. Absolutely, we could be paying the wrong bank account. We could be paying fictitious employees. Yeah, well done. Yeah, really nice one with loads of things. People could be paying each other's wages. Oh yeah, exactly. So many issues. Yeah, but hopefully this in a nutshell will do it. Yeah, so it could be that, you know, I don't want to speak ill of payroll, but maybe somebody in payroll set up a fictitious employee who's actually their mate, or a second one of them. You know, yeah, John could be paying himself again. And if we're only checking the total based on the payroll records, that's not going to get picked up, because that fictitious employee is going to be on the payroll records as well. Yeah, so it's going to be, again, there's a big impact on the bottom line, risk of payments being missed, risk of fraudulent payments being made. And we picked loads of people mentioned that in the chat, which is really, really encouraging. So what is our recommendation for this final weakness? What can we do to make this better? And I think the recommendation on this is quite in-depth. I'll explain why. Yeah, definitely. Spot check individual payments. Take a sample. Let's get our auditing head going. We'll get Alison to do a random sample, maybe of, I don't know, a certain percentage of employees each month, and check it back to the payroll system. Really good. So that's going to hopefully knock out any issues with, you know, incorrect bank details or something like that. However, this is why I say it's a bit of an in-depth process. What that won't pick up is fictitious employees, because they are going to be on the payroll system as well. Yeah, so the recommendation may not just stretch to finance, it may also stretch to payroll, depending whether payroll is part of finance or HR, of course. So it's also important that the payroll system is also sampled and checked to make sure that, you know, false employees aren't being put on there by the payroll team. Wouldn't have been checked out by HR, so the flags on those was false. Yeah, so we would maybe say, you know, we'll take an employee out of the payroll system, go to HR and say, you know, this person's on our payroll list. Have you got, you know, their contract of employment? Have you got, you know, often when you start a job, you're asked for like your passport or your driving license and all this stuff to prove that you are who you say you are. It could be that, you know, between payroll and HR, they would do those checks on a regular basis to ensure that each employee is legit. Yeah. So what I've given you there is probably 5 fairly I think probably the 5 kind of ones that stand out most, or they stood out most to me anyway when I was preparing for this. Could no segregation abuse be a potential problem? Yes, I don't see why not. That could be on the list. I think you could potentially say that, oh my God, that, yeah, I suppose potentially that John is doing all of the setup of the payroll. It's not being checked by a more senior person. So again, it does kind of link back a bit. Yeah, absolutely. Again, there are more than 5 weaknesses given in this, and I've maybe just picked the 5 that I thought were the most relevant. What I would say is, if you can find a weakness and you can show what the potential problem is and you can put a recommendation in place, I don't see why they wouldn't give you the marks for that. I think what can be dangerous, and when I've marked sort of done a lot of PDSY mock marking over my time, is that often students will pick 2 weaknesses that I think are too similar, and then you end up kind of saying the same thing twice over, and obviously you only get marks for one of those. Yeah. But I think as written tasks go, I don't think this one is the worst. I think there's ones that potentially could be harder on the exam. So yeah, but yeah, I hope that was useful to go through a task. And if I didn't pick up on your suggestion, doesn't mean that it was wrong necessarily. It just, you know, I got my 5 that I'd set. I suppose it's quite hard to kind of deal with it in a session. So yeah, that is kind of everything that I wanted to go through tonight. If you want to hang around and ask any questions at the end, then I'll be around for a bit longer. But otherwise, I will stop the recording, and you can get yourself off and enjoy the rest of your evening.